Hello, Jacksonites. So, please, right off the bat, I want to greatly stress that I am very much so venturing outside of my comfort zone doing this video. But this is something that I feel like I could make into an entertaining topic. So I do please ask that you give me some slack and give me a chance to make this video possibly into what it could be. So for the last few months, and especially last year around June, I went through a really big phase where I was interested in prehistoric life. Obviously, because I got into Jurassic Park again and I reviewed the original Jurassic Park trilogy again, and I was watching a whole bunch of dinosaur content on YouTube. Um, and I do want to, right off the bat, say that this video was greatly inspired by my two favorite dinosaur YouTube channels, um, Extinct Zoo and especially Dino Facts. If you guys are at all interested in dinosaurs and you want some YouTubers who break down and talk about dinosaurs in a way that's easy to understand, I highly recommend those two channels, Dino Facts and Extinct Zoo. And some time ago, Dinofax himself actually made a video where he lists off his top 10 favorite dinosaurs. And, that was an entertaining video in and of itself. And it just kind of got me thinking, what if I was to do something like that? Because as I talked about at the beginning of my Jurassic Park review last year, when I was a kid, I was absolutely obsessed with dinosaurs. I love Jurassic Park. I love the Land Before Time series. I would watch dinosaur documentaries as much as I could, and I would read dinosaur books for hours and hours and hours and hours, for days, months, weeks, years at a time. So yeah, I was obsessed with dinosaurs, and I became very familiar with a good chunk of the dinosaur species as a whole. And I used to own like a stack this tall of dinosaur books that I would read and plunder all the time, enjoying the artwork, reading facts, reading history, about when these dinosaurs were discovered, how they lived, what they ate, how they fought, so on and so forth. And I just couldn't get enough of it. And I definitely like to think that studying dinosaurs was my gateway into being obsessed with monster movies and giant monsters and kaiju and such. Because, of course, in terms of real life, dinosaurs truly are the closest that we ever could have gotten to real life giant monsters like Godzilla or Gamera or any reptilian kaiju from the Godzilla series or the Ultraman franchise, so on and so forth. And so lately, I've just been thinking, I think I want to do something dinosaur related, and pay my respects and pay my tributes to the dinosaur YouTubers that I've been watching. And a top 10 list sounded cool, but you know what? There's a lot of dinosaur species that I really like and find really interesting. So I can't do a top 10. I think I have to do a top 20. Um yep, that's a fair point. The Shark King, I like that name by the way. Says same with Titanosaurus too, since there's a sauropod dinosaur with the same name as the kaiju. Yeah, I do believe Titanosaurus, the sauropod, was discovered sometime before Titanosaurus, the kaiju. So I don't think they named the sauropod after the monster. Although, funny enough, there has been, or at least there was, a there was a Triassic theropod dinosaur called Godzillasaurus, but I think that one has now been rendered, as paleontologists call it, nomen dubium, or non-valid. I also want to give a couple disclaimers. I am not a paleontologist. I do not have a PhD in paleontology, obviously. And saying that you know a lot about paleontology just because you've read a lot of books and you've watched a lot of documentaries and such, that doesn't make you an expert. But I do like to think that I know a fair bit about paleontology, and I am quite familiar with many species of dinosaurs and also just many different parts and eras of Earth's past. The going all the way back to the Ordovician period, like 400 million years ago, when life on Earth first started to arise, beginning life in the oceans and such. Then moving up to the Ordovician period with the armor-plated fish, or Gojirasaurus. Yeah, excuse me, not Godzillasaurus. That's the movie. But yeah, Gojirasaurus. That was the name of that Triassic dinosaur. Again, though, I think that species has been rendered invalid. Yeah, Ordovician period with the armor-plated fish like Dunkleosteus and such. Then going up to the Carboniferous period, where we had dragonflies the size of bald eagles and giant millipedes the size of a car. And then the Permian period, which was the closest where life on Earth ever came to being extinct at one point, where 90% of all life on Earth was almost completely wiped out. Um, then, of course, the era of the dinosaurs, the Triassic period, the Jurassic period, and the Cretaceous period. Then after that, we had the KT extinction, which wiped out the dinosaurs. Um, then after that, we had after the dinosaurs is probably the period of time that I am the least familiar with. But we, of course, had the Eocene. I think that's what it was called, where we had the very first giant carnivorous whale, Basilosaurus. And then a few million years after that, we, of course, had the Leviathan whale and the megalodon shark. And on land, we would have giant reptilian predators like I think it's Borsuchus, and the giant prehistoric caiman called the Purosaurus. So I am quite familiar with paleontology and prehistoric life. And also, Extinct Zoo and Dinofax have greatly, in a modern day, enhanced my knowledge and has caught me up on a lot of aspects of paleontology that have come to light in recent years. Matter of fact, on this list, well, actually, no, yeah, it's because of those two that have brought some dinosaurs that I otherwise would not have known about to light and put themselves on this list. So, again, I have to give credit to those two for bringing those to my attention. So, today, join me as I count off my top 20 favorite dinosaurs, varying from certain parts of the era of dinosaurs, but for the most part, most of the dinosaurs, actually, no, I think all of the dinosaurs on this list are from either the Jurassic or the Cretaceous period. Admittedly, I just don't really find dinosaurs from the Triassic period um, all that interesting, mainly just because that wasn't really when dinosaurs didn't really rule the earth throughout most of the Triassic period. They were just very much another species of animals that inhabited planet Earth during that period of time. It wasn't until the early to mid Jurassic period when dinosaurs grew to such large sizes that they became the dominant species of life on Earth. Um, and I also want to give a I want to give a few disclaimers. So I don't I don't pretend to be a paleontologist. I don't pretend to be an expert on dinosaurs. And this is not really here to or I'm not really here to like how do I put this? Like try to write an essay on each dinosaur and like just this isn't me saying that I think these are the 20 greatest and coolest dinosaurs that ever lived. These are just my personal preferences in like these are the dinosaurs that I find to be the most interesting, and these are the ones I find to be just the most cool and fascinating and just pleasant and entertaining to look at, research and discuss. Um each dinosaur that I will be talking about, I will give some snippets of information, and I will also just be, talking about what I think is cool about them, like the piece of dinosaur media that I think of the most when it comes to these dinosaurs, for the most part, and just what they mean to me and what the impact they've had on me, both in my interest in paleontology and in my interest in film. So even though I am a movie reviewer, talking about again, like these are the closest that we will ever get to real life giant monsters. So you could definitely say that this video is somewhat film adjacent because again, dinosaurs make for really easy monsters and they can make for really easy monster movies. So without further ado, let us get into it. One last disclaimer, too. There's a lot of theropod dinosaurs, aka there's a lot of carnivorous dinosaurs on this list. There are some plant eating or herbivorous dinosaurs on this list, but I am very much so biased towards the meat eaters. I just think they're the cooler type of dinosaurs, and they're just the ones that wet my whistle the most. So, but starting off this list, and also one last disclaimer too, some of my information might be dated because even though DinoFacts and Extinct Zoo have helped me like update a lot of my knowledge, there are still some dinosaurs on here that my knowledge of them might be somewhat dated based off of what I've learned when I was a lot younger. And there has been a lot of changes and advancements in the world of paleontology in the last 10 to 15 years. So I do apologize if I get some information wrong. I did try to research the most current and up to date information on each dinosaur because this list here took me about 2 weeks to put together. So I'll do my best. I'm pretty sure most of my information is correct, but if there are some errors here and there, I do apologize. But yeah, starting off with number 20 is Diplodocus, my favorite sauropod, the one and only sauropod on this list, actually. And actually, before we begin, and yes, my hair is even longer than it was 2 weeks ago. I'm pretty sure I could full on put it in a bun if I wanted to. Gotta crack open the burp fuel because, of course, I have something a little different. Mountain Dew Baja Blast. Normally, I'm not much of a Dew fan, but this is a good flavor. Okay, so yeah, number 20 is Diplodocus. The name meaning, I'm pretty sure, double beam, which is a odd name. Diplodocus was discovered in 1877 by paleontologist S.W. Williston. And I'm presuming that the name double beam is reference to the fact that Diplodocus, while it was not the largest member of the sauropod family, I do believe it might have been the longest or one of the longest members of the sauropod family. Diplodocus lived in the late Jurassic period around 154 million years ago, and their size ranged from 24 to 26 meters in length, or 79 to 85 feet. And I've even heard some reports say that they could have reached up to 100 to maybe 110 feet in length. Length purely. The largest dinosaurs are calculated in size more so by weight than length. And animals overall throughout history, they more so are calculated by weight rather than length, because nowadays you can have like an oarfish that lives in Japan, the seas of Japan, which can reach up to 20 to 25 feet in length. Now, sure, it may be one of the longest fish that ever lived, but it's not one of the largest because it only weighs about maybe 300, maybe 350 pounds. So science determines pure size by mass and weight. Although certainly Diplodocus was not a light dinosaur, it being a sauropod, its weight ranged from around 15 to 25 tons fully grown. Oh, that's cool. Um, Now I'm most familiar with Diplodocus through the Walking with Dinosaurs, both the special, The Life of Big Al, but also the first Jurassic episode in Walking with Dinosaurs, where Diplodocus were the main focus of that episode. I think it was called Land of Giants. Um, and that, of course, is where Diplodocus got its main spotlight and became much more familiar in the pop culture ether. Although nowadays the notoriety of Diplodocus kind of has been overshadowed, literally and figuratively, by the presence of Brachiosaurus, mostly due to Jurassic Park. But yeah, Diplodocus is the one that just captures my attention the most. Now, again, it wasn't the absolute largest sauropod. There's quite a few other sauropods that were much bigger. Like Brachiosaurus was a much larger specimen, and then you'd have Cretaceous sauropods like Titanosaurs, Argentinosaurs, and these literally are true. There's Supersaurus and Ultrasaurus. Those are two sauropods that were much heavier and much larger than Diplodocus. But its name Double Beam, I think, is very fitting because it's a very long and lanky sauropod. It had an extremely long and skinny neck and an extremely long and skinny whip-like tail. I'm pretty sure Diplodocus may have had the longest tail of any sauropod that ever lived. And that was its main method of attack and defense. It would lash out at it attacking dinosaurs with its tail strong enough to tear skin or even shatter bones. There it was very thin and very whip like in the last, I don't know, fifth of it or so. But yeah, I could lash him so hard. It was a very effective defensive weapon. Um, so yeah, not much else to say about Diplodocus. I just think it's hold on one second. Sorry. Yeah, I just think it's the coolest sauropod. It's the one that captures my attention the most, and it is the one that I am the most familiar with due to walking with dinosaurs. So, yeah. Coming in at number 19 is, I have heard this be pronounced quite a few ways, but I'm pretty sure it's pronounced Ankylosaurus, or name meaning feet. Sorry, it's my mom. The name Ankylosaurus, meaning fused or bent lizard. I don't know about bent. I don't know why that's there. I think fused lizard is much more appropriate. Ankylosaurus was discovered in 1906 by paleontologist Barnum Brown. Uh, it lived in the late Cretaceous period, 68 to 65 million years ago. I'm pretty sure it did live up to the KT extinction event. Its size ranged from around 6 meters or 20 feet to maybe around 7 meters or about 22 to 23 feet in length. And its weight would range from a whopping 5 to 8 tons. Ankylosaurus, of course, is the most well known member of the Ankylosaurus family. Ankylosaurus being the giant armored waddling dinosaurs that would have the huge clubs on their tails. And of course, Ankylosaurus is the most well known and famous, and I'm pretty sure it was the largest member of the Ankylosaur family, which rightfully so. It seems like it's funny how dinosaurs seem to reach their peak as a species right when the extinction event took place. Um, which is something I've been thinking about recently that comes off like a really big, strange coincidence, if you ask me. Um, Now everybody is familiar, or at least a lot of people who know of dinosaurs and dinosaur media are somewhat familiar with Ankylosaurus. It seemed to be the one dinosaur, along with Triceratops, that would give Tyrannosaurus Rex a real challenge and a real run for its money. And it would receive some other notoriety when it was part of the Animal Planet no, Discovery Channel special Ankylosaurus versus Velociraptor, where scientists would recreate an ankylosaurus tail and would showcase its effect of its swinging club tail and what it would do to like a thick piece of wood or a sturdy cow's rib cage. And in both cases, it snapped right through the thick piece of wood and it shattered the cow's rib cage and just tore right through the heavy bones. Um, Ankylosaurus to me is really cool because if you ever wondered, like, sure, we have elephants and rhinos nowadays, but in my opinion, the Ankylosaurus truly was the best definition of an organic living tank. It was so heavily armored and it was such a big, bulky tank. Even its eyelids were somewhat hardened and had thick scales covering them. And it seemed like it was just the one dinosaur that, in my opinion, was truly impervious to predatory attack. The only way that scientists theorize that T Rex may have been able to prey on Ankylosaurus is if it managed to flip it over on its back and eat its belly like a turtle. But if you ask me, that probably would be damn near impossible considering how well armored they were and how heavy they were, but also how good they were at using that club tail of theirs to do some damage. Um So yeah, I just think they're really cool. If you like heavy armored animals and heavily defensive animals, seems like there's only one or two other examples other than Ankylosaurus that could really give it a run for its money. But yeah, Ankylosaurus was a cool animal and is a cool dinosaur. Yep, I knew that. Coming in at number 18 is Acrocanthosaurus, the first theropod, discovered in the early 1940s. I wasn't able to find out who exactly discovered Acrocanthosaurus. The name meaning high spined lizard, although funny, Acrocanthosaurus is not a spinosaur. It's actually a carcharodontosaurid. It lived in the early Cretaceous period, 113 to 110 million years ago. And it, for a time, was kind of seen as the top predator of the late Cretaceous or the early Cretaceous period, with its size ranging from 11 to 11 and a half meters, or around 36 to 38 feet in length, and its weight ranged from 4.4 to 6.6 tons. So it was a big boy. Not one of the absolute biggest theropod dinosaurs, but it was still a pretty, it was like a light heavyweight in terms of large theropod dinosaurs. Um, I'm not quite as familiar with Acrocanthosaurus as I am with other theropod dinosaurs that I like, but still, Acrocanthosaurus is still very notable and memorable because, like I said, for a brief period of time, Acrocanthosaurus came out during a strange kind of transitionary period in the time of the dinosaurs where the allosaurs and torvosaurs of the Jurassic period had gone extinct. And this was still before the big heavy hitter days of the Cretaceous period where you had like Mapusaurus, Giganotosaurus, um, and of course T-Rex. So yeah, Acrocanthosaurus seemed to fill that niche of top predator in the days of the dinosaurs for a good chunk of time, and it again, it still was a pretty heavy hitter. Um, it's also not my favorite member of the Carcharodontosaurid family, but yeah, it still is a pretty notable member. Um, I'm not quite I haven't really seen Acrocanthosaurus in any form of dinosaur media, except for a dinosaur book that I used to own. It was called Raptor Red, where the main character of that book was a Utahraptor named Raptor Red, and those live. Well, I don't think they lived during the same time. Oh well, they might have. They might have crossed paths briefly at some point. But one of the main antagonists of that book was a bunch of acrocanthosaurs. And because of that dinosaur's presence in that book, I was of course curious, what is acrocanthosaurus? So then I would look it up and do some research on it and find out, oh, okay, it was a fairly large theropod. Okay, I think that'll be the last one. So excuse me. Yeah, not much else to say. Acrocanthosaurus is cool. It's got a cool name. It has a cool design. And it, yeah, it's just cool. And funny, speaking of which, my number 17 is Utahraptor. Discovered in 1993. Funny, that same year that Jurassic Park came out. By James Kirkland, and its name meaning Utah's predator, or maybe Utah's thief, because I think raptor means thief. It lived in the early Cretaceous period, 135 to 130 million years ago, and it was the largest member of the Dromaeosaurid family, the same family where Deinonychus and, of course, Velociraptor was a part of. Uh, Size ranging from 6 to 7 meters, 20 to 23 feet in length, and it could weigh up to 1,100 pounds. Now, full disclaimer, I'm not a big fan of raptors. Like I said, I am biased towards theropod dinosaurs, but I'm also even more so biased towards the big boys. I like the big heavy hitters like Acrocanthosaurus and Carcharodontosaurids and Tyrannosaurs. I'm just a big fan of all those dinosaurs, but I will give some credit to the largest member of the Dromaeosaurid family, of course, being Utahraptor. Um, Now, of course, as I learned, it was not Utahraptors that were used as the inspiration for the Velociraptors in Jurassic Park. That was specifically Deinonychus, but they are made to be twice as large. And from what I've researched and from what I've heard, the Velociraptors in Jurassic Park are their face designs and their body designs are based much more on Deinonychus than Velociraptor. But I have seen quite a few comparisons between the Jurassic Park Velociraptors and the Utahraptors, and I gotta say, it's kind of a shame that they don't include Utahraptors in Jurassic Park, because I think aside from the Indoraptor, the Utahraptor would give the Velociraptors in Jurassic Park quite a bit of runs for their money. Um, Utahraptors were some gnarly little bastards, even though they were little bastards, even though they were dromaeosaurs, um, and they were as big as they were also some really freaky ambush predators. They would employ from I think it's called the I can't remember what it's called, but it's a method of hunting that Utahraptors apparently were like the number one raptor species that would employ this. But now most raptors, especially Utahraptors and other raptors that were around this size, they were ambush predators. They were still somewhat smaller theropod dinosaurs, but because Utahraptor was almost 20 feet, they were a little too heavy to be really chased down type of hunters. They weren't cheetahs, for example. Velociraptors are much more like that, from what I've heard. So they would employ um, ambush hunting techniques where they would surprise their prey and they would leap onto the backs of their prey and hanging on to them with their arms and their toe claws, and they would just bite and tear and rip into their prey with their jaws, and this is what would cause them to die of shock and blood loss. But I'm pretty sure that now, like other dromaeosaurids, Utahraptor, of course, had a very large, curved meat hook shaped claw on the second toe of each of its foot. And apparently, these claws would reach up to 8 or 9 inches in length. That's roughly about maybe about that long. So I'd imagine a claw that large being sunk into your hide probably doesn't feel too great. um, I would absolutely love to see a modern day dinosaur horror film utilize Utahraptors. I think these would be the scariest dinosaurs that humans could go up against, in my opinion. Especially, Utahraptors were feathered, so I think seeing giant feathered 20-foot long birds coming after your ass, trying to tear you apart with 8-inch long claws, would be a pretty scary sight to see. So yeah, number 17, Utahraptor. Some nasty little bastards. And speaking of raptors, at number 16, we have this is a strange name, Maip macrothorax. Name loosely translated to the shadow of death. They were discovered in 2019 by paleontologist Alexis Rolando. I'm pretty sure Maip macrothorax has somewhat fragmentary remains, from what I've heard. They lived in the mid Cretaceous period, uh, and they were the largest member. I believe Maip macrothorax was the largest member of the Megaraptor family. Now, the Megaraptors were different from the regular raptors, of course. And Megaraptor is its own dinosaur, but is also the name of a subspecies of dinosaurs in and of themselves. They were very similar in appearance to other raptors like the dromaeosaurs, but there's two main differences. They were much larger. Maip macrothorax, tentatively, because of the fragmentary remains, their size ranged from around 9 to 10 meters, or around 30 to 33 feet in length, and their weight topped off at around 5 tons. So they were also some fairly big heavy hitters. But another main difference between Megaraptors and Dromaeosaurs, they lacked the large toe claws on their feet, but instead they had much larger arms with huge claws. And this is believed to be their main method of taking down prey. They would use these large claws on their hands to just rip the shit out of their prey, which caused shock and blood loss. And then they, of course, would go in and eat their prey. Not a whole lot is known about my macrothorax, and there it hasn't been much showcasing in film or television for my macrothorax. I think there was like one or two documentaries recently that showcased them, but because they're such a recent find and because their remains are so fragmentary, not a whole lot is known about them, and not a whole lot I can really say about my macrothorax slash Megaraptor as a whole. But I do like the concept of taking kind of the basic body structure of a dromaeosaur like Velociraptor, or in this case, Utahraptor, and then just beefing it up to be like 3 or 4 times larger. It's a cool concept. It would be really cool to see, and it is also a scary concept. I mean, Utahraptors and Velociraptors are freaky enough on their own, but what would happen if they were even larger? And actually, from what I've heard, actually, this just came to me. If you do want to see a good representation of a Megaraptor, the Indominus Rex is essentially that, from what I've heard from one or two sources. Um, they that have stated that the Indominus Rex is the closest to a full-blown Megaraptor style dinosaur that we could see. I mean, yeah, that's cool. I like the Indominus Rex. Coming in at number 15 is Stegosaurus. The name meaning roofed lizard, one of the most famous dinosaurs of all time, and is certainly one of the most famous Jurassic dinosaurs of all time. Actually, in some ways, it might have been the number one most famous dinosaur of the Jurassic period. Stegosaurus was discovered in the late 1800s. Again, I don't know who specifically discovered Stegosaurus. Um, it lived in the late Jurassic period, 155 to 145 million years ago. And it, of course, is the most famous member of the Stegosaur family. There's actually quite a few different species of members of the Stegosaur family. There's Kentrosaurus, Gigantspinosaurus, Hesperosaurus, Tuojangosaurus, and I was like Stegosaurus. Duh. Stegosaurus was not the largest member of the Stegosaur family. Let's see. Oh, never mind. I guess Stegosaurus was the biggest one. Um, Stegosaurus was, of course, a herbivorous dinosaur, and it was a proto. I like to think that the Stegosaurs were kind of prototype dinosaurs that evolved into, or didn't evolve, but they may have had offshoots that became the Ankylosaur family. I don't know if there is any connection between the Stegosaur family and the Ankylosaur family, but it did kind of seem that once the Stegosaurs died out in the late Jurassic to very early Cretaceous period, then the Ankylosaurs rose to fame, filling the niche of armored dinosaurs. But for a long time, the Stegosaur family was the one that filled the armored dinosaur niche all over the world. And of course, again, Stegosaurus is the most famous member of that family. And it was a giant too. The size ranged from 6 to 7.5 meters, 20 to 25 feet. Although apparently there have been some specimens that have been found that were close to 30 feet long, and its weight ranged from 4 to 7 or maybe possibly 8 tons. So they were some massive animals, and they're also quite dangerous animals. The big plates on the Stegosaurus back, the purpose of those is still up for debate. It's also debatable on whether or not the plates were sharp at all. I don't think they were like cutting edge sharp. They may have been pointed because we see Stegosaurus skeletons and they have the plates and spikes intact. But a lot of people, I said this in my Jurassic Park 3 review, a lot of dinosaurs, if they had claws and if they had body armor like spikes or the plates in Stegosaurus's case, they, as big as they were, they still had another sheath of material called keratin, which is the same material as your fingernails, that would add another like 10 to 15% of mass to whatever was in that. So we see fossils of Utahraptor claws that were 8 inches in length, but we in fact really only see about a 6 inch claw. The keratin has rotted away long, long time ago. But yeah, the Stegosaur plates, I don't think they were sharp, but they surely probably did act as some kind of armor because theropods probably couldn't get their whole mouth around the plates in order to bite down. But what really made stegosaurs so dangerous was their spiked tails, or I think it's called a thagomizer. Each one of these spikes was up to 2 feet in length. Roughly about this long, give or take. Give or take, like maybe about this long. So imagine a 25-foot long dinosaur with a tail that has four of this size of spikes coming at you, trying to swing it at you and impale your ass. You're going to shit your pants. And actually, it's been debated on whether or not stegosaurs may have been the most dangerous dinosaur in the Jurassic period. Yeah, I'd be inclined to agree because I also think it has been stated in recent years that herbivorous dinosaurs, in some ways, were more dangerous than the theropod dinosaurs. And I actually could see that because herbivorous dinosaurs live very stressful lives. It was constantly a fight for survival. Theropods, they were surely dangerous when they got hungry, but once they had their fill, they would just go and sleep it off and shit it out. Once they were full, they were quite mellow. Unless you tried to threaten their young or invade their territory, theropods wouldn't really do much towards you at all. S- Supposedly. But yeah, Stegosaurus, it's an iconic dinosaur. It looks really cool. It's very fascinating and love it. It's a cool dinosaur. Coming in at number 14 is Pachyrhinosaurus, discovered in 1946 by Charles M. Sternberg, I think its name was. Its name meaning thick nosed lizard. This is the first member of the Ceratopsian family. The hell was that? Okay. Um, not the largest. It lived in the late Cretaceous period, 73 to 69 giggity million years ago. And its size ranged from 5 to 8 meters, 16 to 26 feet, and its weight ranged from around 2 to 4 tons. Now, there are technically three different variants of Pachyrhinosaurus, varying in size, but I just think the collective overall member Pachyrhinosaurus, I really dig. Ceratopsians are famous and most well known for having large, bony, jagged frills covering their necks, coming from the base of their skulls, and they would be adorned with various horns all over their face and frill. But Pachyrhinosaurus was very unique. While it had probably some horns adorning its frill, covering its neck, Pachyrhinosaurus was unique because it did not have horns on its face. It had a big, bony, bulbous protrusion on its face, which is apparently called a boss. Interesting name. Um, So it's fitting that this dinosaur is called well, I mean, not interesting, thick nosed lizard. But it's funny it's called a Pachyrhinosaurus because we like to think that rhinos are the closest thing to a living. Well, I mean, they are the closest thing to a living battering ram. But if you ask me, throughout Earth's history of life, the ultimate example of an animal literally being just an organic giant battering ram, aside from Pachycephalosaurus, Pachyrhinosaurus, in my opinion, is the ultimate example of just a giant battering ram. Because that boss could be from 6 to 8, maybe 10 inches thick, I think. Let's look it up. Hold on. So yeah, instead of horns, Pachyrhinosaurus bore massive flattened bosses, a large boss over the nose and a smaller one over the eyes. Um, for a while, it was thought that the top edge of the bosses were flattened. Um, but some species have these jagged extensions that come out of their bosses. So it would presumably that would add even more extra damage into Pachyrhinosaur's opponents that would have been smacked. But the main nasal boss, sorry, the main nasal boss surely would have been it was huge and wide, but it also probably was at least 8 to 10 inches thick, maybe even thicker. So and because this animal weighed 2 to 4 tons, you got a thick ass battering ram coming at you, and 2 to 4 tons of force and pressure coming in right behind that. Surely it would have cracked bones or maybe even shattered skulls. Who knows? And probably like mountain goats, this is presumably how pachyrhinosaurs mated during rutting season. They would have just bashed each other in the head repeatedly until one backed down. Also, like Pachycephalosaurus, ironically, because I think, let's see, the name Pachycephalosaurus, meaning thick-headed lizard. This is the smaller dinosaur that has the huge bone dome shape on its skull. So I don't think those two cross paths at all, Pachyrhinosaurus and Pachycephalosaurus, but they had quite a few similarities in life. They both had really thick, bony heads, and they would just bash into each other repeatedly and bash their opponents. So yeah, not a whole lot to say about Pachyrhinosaurus. There's other ceratopsians that I do like more than this, but the fact that this is the one ceratopsian that did not utilize horns on its head for combat and was again literally just a big giant dinosaur wrecking ball or battering ram, I think that's unique and cool in and of itself to land at a spot on this list. Coming in at number 13, Dilophosaurus, name meaning two-crested lizard. Of course, Jurassic Park fans are quite familiar with the wildly inaccurate portrayal of the Dilophosaurus in that franchise. However, if you keep my headcanon theory in mind of the dinosaur DNA being mutated by being combined with modern day animal DNA, I think that does give the design of the Dilophosaurus at least an explanation for why it looks that way in the Jurassic Park series. But um, in real life, Dilophosaurus was a very different dinosaur. It was discovered in 1940, but it wasn't properly named until 1970. But was first discovered by a man named Samuel P. Wells. Its name again meaning two-crested lizard, and it lived in the early Jurassic period, 196 to 186 million years ago. So apparently, the Dilophosaurus was among the very first, like, big, sort of supersized theropod dinosaurs. Because throughout the Triassic period, the largest carnivorous dinosaur was maybe, I think it was called Herrerasaurus, which uh, I think at its biggest, it was maybe 18 to 20 feet long. But Dilophosaurus was true. Fuck, I'm sorry, my nose is so itchy. But um, its size was up to around 7 or 7.5 meters, around 23 to maybe 25 feet in length. And its weight was nearly apparently 900 or 1,100 pounds. And it was truly a gnarly dinosaur in its own right. Um, like many other dinosaurs that have these strange um, protruding bodily features. It's not really known what the crests on their heads were for. Some people think they were for display purposes. Some think they were for combat purposes, like taking down prey with by headbutting them with their crests or fighting with rivals over territory or food. I don't think that was the case because they were just bone. I don't think they would be as effective in taking down prey. I think in this case, because so many people just say, "Oh, it's just for display," which I think is kind of a loose blanket term. But in Dilophosaurus's case, I think that probably is the most likely reason for the crests is for display purposes, for mating or driving off male or other rivals. Um, yeah, Dilophosaurus is another dinosaur that I think would lend itself really well. I mean, the Jurassic Park design, I think, lends itself well to jump scares, but if they were to do another dinosaur horror film, I think the Dilophosaurs would make for a good, like, more human-sized, scary, freaky threat for them to go up against. Um, and like I stated in my Jurassic Park video, I'm pretty sure it has been confirmed that Dilophosaurs, they were ambush predators. They would surprise their prey. They would clamp their jaws down on their prey and tear them apart with their large claws on either their feet or their hands. Because um, I think it's been discovered that they had quite robust arms with thick, gnarly claws attached to them. For a while, it was theorized that they had a really weak jaw, but further studies in recent years have disproven that, and they did have quite a gnarly and heinous bite with some gnarly teeth to go along with it. So, yeah, I think a Dilophosaurus would make for a really interesting and entertaining and scary threat in a modern day dinosaur horror film. But yeah, so Dilophosaurus, that's a cool dinosaur. Definitely a dinosaur that, as much as I love Jurassic Park and as much as I love the first Jurassic Park film, I don't want to say it does Dilophosaurus a disservice, but it definitely does not reach the full potential of Dilophosaurus as a monster. Let me just kill this. Hang on. Coming in at number 12 is Baryonyx, the first Spinosaur on this list. Baryonyx means heavy claw, which is very fitting in just a minute. Baryonyx was discovered in 1983, but was officially named in 1986 by Alan Churig and Angela Milner. It lived in the early Cretaceous period, 130 to 125 million years ago. The name Heavy Claw, of course, being very fitting, as Baryonyx and many other Spinosaurs, one of their most defining features is the fact that they have these huge um, claws on their first finger. Let's see how big they were. The Baryonyx had large claws that were up to a foot in length. So you, uh, yeah, roughly about that big from here to here. So you got a dinosaur that has one big claw in its hand that's about this big. But Baryonyx, it being a Spinosaur, it's heavily theorized that Baryonyx was more, I think it's called piscivorous, where it would eat fish. And that's actually one of the biggest defining traits of Spinosaurs, aside from their designs, Many spinosaurs were heavily theorized to be more aquatic based or semi aquatic based and would eat a lot of aquatic life. There are many species of prehistoric fish that lived or that would grow up to like 10 to 12 feet in length. But for a lot of the smaller fish, especially with baryonyx, they would use that big giant claw just as a fish hook to spear fish and just reach it up to their mouth and eat them. Um, Baryonyx was not the largest spinosaur. Its size ranged from 7.5 to 10 meters, 25 to 33 feet. Still fairly long and large, but their weight ranged from around 1.2 to 2 tons. So they were much more lightweight compared to other contemporary um, early Cretaceous theropods. Like a baryonyx is definitely much more lightly built and smaller than, say, Acrocanthosaurus, which I think lived around the same time. But still, I've always been a big fan of the baryonyx design. I just think it looks really cool. It looks very unique. Even though they were mostly fish eaters, they also probably hunted some smaller dinosaurs, ranging from around 80 to maybe 200 pounds. Um, and they also probably scavenged if there was like a dead sauropod or a dead ceratopsian on a beach somewhere. They probably surely did just help themselves. But yeah, I've just always liked the baryonyx design. I think, or design, but like baryonyx as a whole. It seems like they were just very kind of keep to themselves, just hanging out by the shores of rivers and lakes, just fishing to their heart's content and enjoying life. Surely though, baryonyx were probably quite dangerous animals, but yeah, I've just always liked baryonyx. I think they're cool. Hold on. Also, pardon my nose. Coming in at number 11 is Suchomimus, the only other Spinosaur member on this list. Name meaning crocodile mimic, Suchomimus, crocodile mimic, discovered in 1998 by Paul Sereno. It lived in the early Cretaceous again, 125 to 112 million years ago. Suchomimus essentially is the updated, improved version of baryonyx in many ways. Its size range from 9.5 to 11 meters, 31 to 36 feet, and its weight ranged from 2.5 to 3.8 tons. So it was not lengthwise, but in terms of weight, it was literally twice as large as baryonyx, and it was also probably twice as dangerous. Suchomimus did also have a very similar lifestyle to baryonyx, as obviously it looked very similar to baryonyx. It too had the giant forefinger claw to spear and catch fish. It had a very similar long, narrow crocodilian-esque snout, just like baryonyx. But because it was larger and it was heavier, there's a lot more evidence that suggests that Suchomimus, it probably did stay near some aquatic areas, but it was more comfortable being an active predator chasing down other prey, um, like ranging up to maybe a ton size. Because Spinosaurs are characterized by not having the strongest bites, but I think Suchomimus might have been the one of only two or three Spinosaur um, members that, well, it didn't have a strong bite. It did have more uniquely shaped teeth in that they were slightly curved backwards, A lot of other spinosaurs like Irritator, Reparovenator, and Baryonyx, they had straight conical shaped teeth, and this was purely just they were evolved and designed to once the jaws came shut, they would just stab and grip, which was used to grip onto slippery prey. But I think Suchomimus, it had teeth that were more adept for still being able to capture fish and slippery prey, but they did also lend themselves more to be able to capture other prey that wasn't fish. Um, So, not a whole lot of else other to fuck. Not a whole lot else to say about Suchomimus. I initially was gonna flip these two around because I do know a little bit more about Baryonyx than Suchomimus, but the more I looked at the two, I just like Suchomimus a little more because Baryonyx is cool and all, but because Suchomimus is essentially an updated, improved version of Baryonyx, I gotta give it more to Suchomimus. Not to sound cliche and not to sound dumb or arrogant, but I do often fall into the mindset of bigger is better. And when it comes to these two, yeah, I like Suchomimus just a little bit more than Baryonyx. Coming in at with number 10, we're gonna get into some heavy hitters here. Allosaurus. Discovered in 1877 by Othniel Charles Marsh. You're going to hear this name quite a few times from here on out. Seems Othniel was quite a, well, yeah, it's a strange name, but he was quite a prolific paleontologist. The name means different lizard, which is in reference to its very strangely shaped, ornate head crest on its skull. It lived in the late Jurassic period, 155 to 145 million years ago. And as I've discovered in recent years, so Allosaurus, I was led to believe, was kind of like a prototype T Rex for the Jurassic period, with it being up to 40 feet in length, thanks to the Walking with Dinosaur specials, specifically, again, Land of Giants and especially the Life of Big Al special. But this is actually not the case. And especially since there's apparently, I think, at least three different variants of Allosaurus. I think there's one species that does get close to that size, but apparently the general size of Allosaurus ranged from 8.5 to 9.7 meters, or around 28 to 32 feet. And its weight ranged from 2 to 3 to maybe 4 tons. That is still a fairly sized theropod dinosaur and would make it one of the big top predators of the late Jurassic period. Apparently, its only other rival was another dinosaur called Torvosaurus, which is a different species of theropod dinosaur altogether. It's called a megalosaur, which megalosaurs are some of the oldest known big theropod dinosaurs throughout the entire dinosaur family. Um, Allosaurus is I think it's a family in and of itself, but still, Allosaurus, I do think, is a very noteworthy and a very distinct dinosaur because after Dilophosaurus, Allosaurus was it seemingly, aside from Torvosaurus, the first true big heavy hitter giant theropod dinosaur. Where theropod dinosaur because the herbivores of the Jurassic period started getting so big. I mean, again, you had Stegosaurus and all the sauropods like Diplodocus, Apatosaurus, Brontosaurus, Camarasaurus, Brachiosaurus. You had all of these big, giant herbivorous dinosaurs. It only makes sense that the predators of those animals had to get bigger and had to up their game, biologically speaking. And it seems like Allosaurus, again, was the first true big heavy hitter. And it also hunted younger sauropods like Brachiosaurus and especially Diplodocus and Apatosaurus. And it would also commonly prey on Stegosaurus. That was a big gamble, though, considering how dangerous stegosaurs were. But still, there surely were stegosaurs that were killed by allosaurs. But anyway, Allosaurus, I'm very familiar with it because of the Walking with Dinosaurs specials. As apparently inaccurate as they are still entertaining specials. But I also really like it because seemingly Allosaurus was the first true big heavy hitter. And as a fan of the big theropod giant predatory dinosaurs, I think it's fitting that I give a spotlight to one of the very first big ones. Number two. Coming in at number 9 is Tarbosaurus, the first tyrannosaur, or tyrannosaurid, I think is the more proper term, but I just prefer tyrannosaurs. It's easier to say. Name meaning, I think, terror lizard. It was discovered in 1955. I don't know who properly discovered Tarbosaurus. It lived in the late Cretaceous period around 70 million years ago. Tarbosaurus was essentially the Asian or Mongolian equivalent of T Rex and is actually the second largest member of the Tyrannosaur family. Its size ranged from 10 to 12 meters, around 30 to 39 feet in length, and its weight ranged from 4 to 4.5 to maybe around 6 tons. So they were still quite big heavy hitters. And Tarbosaurus can be, I think, effectively described as a diet T Rex, which isn't a bad thing by any means. It just was a slightly different variant for a different habitat and ecosystem. Whereas T Rex lived in North America, of course, Tarbosaurus lived on the other side of the world in the Mongolian desert. Um, Tarbosaurus looked and looks very similar to T Rex, not just because it's the second largest tyrannosaur, but Tarbosaurus is one of 3 members of the Tyrannosauridae family. The other 2 being, of course, Tyrannosaurus rex and the Chinese equivalent of T Rex, Zhucheng tyrannus, which is the third largest tyrannosaur. Um, there are some distinct differences between T Rex and Tarbosaurus, aside from Tarbosaurus being slightly smaller. Um, Tyrannosaurs are distinctly known for having huge skulls and thick necks, but they have tiny, almost vestigial arms. And proportionally, compared to their body sizes, Tarbosaurus is actually notable for having the smallest arms of any known tyrannosaur family. Uh, i.e., they also probably had the weakest arms of any member of the Tyrannosaur family. But the main difference between Tarbosaurus and Tyrannosaurus is their skulls. Obviously, T Rex had the biggest skull of any theropod dinosaur that ever existed. Tarbosaurus also had a large skull, but it was much thinner in profile. Tyrannosaurus was like widthwise, like the width of my head here. It was much wider at the eyes, and it still had an extremely broad and wide mouth and skull. Whereas Tarbosaurus was much thinner and much narrower uh, in design. So while it still had a large skull and it still had a powerful bite, for one thing, it wasn't as strong as T Rex, and it couldn't deliver as much damage as a Tyrannosaurus could. But Tarbosaurus also had a lot more teeth in its jaw. And since it lived alongside a lot of sauropods, surely it used the greater amount of teeth and also the possibility of pack hunting behavior to its advantage to take down the large sauropods that it lived with. But even if it wasn't a pack hunter, the idea of tyrannosaurs being gregarious or pack hunting animals is still hotly debated in the paleontology world. Even if it wasn't a pack hunting dinosaur, Tarbosaurus surely would have been the apex predator of its ecosystem, it being the largest theropod dinosaur in prehistoric Mongolia, living alongside Therizinosaurus and Aeolioramus, another smaller tyrannosaur. Um, yeah, I really dig Tarbosaurus. I think it's a cool dinosaur. I am very biased towards tyrannosaurs. They're my favorite dinosaur family. So it being a diet T-Rex is not a bad thing. But admittedly, that is the reason, though, why it is only number 9 on this list, because it is a diet T-Rex, essentially. So that's not a bad thing, but that's why it's only number 9. But still, Tarbosaurus is a really cool dinosaur, and I'm glad that it finally is getting some more notoriety in the realm of movies and TV, as it was featured somewhat prominently in this new Prehistoric Planet series. And it looked fantastic. Coming in at number 8 is Styracosaurus, the second ceratopsian on this list. Styracosaurus was discovered in 1913 by Lawrence Lambin or Lawrence Lambs, because I wrote this when I was really tired, so beg your pardon. Discovered by Lawrence Lamb in 1913. The name Styracosaurus means spiked lizard, and it lived in the late Cretaceous period. I think it was around, because I couldn't find this. I think it was around 68 or maybe 70 to 68 million years ago. And again, it wasn't the largest member of the ceratopsian family, but still, it was up to 5 to 5.5 meters or 16 to 18 feet in length. And its weight ranged from around 2 to 3 tons. So it was still quite a chunky animal. I dig Styracosaurus because if you like ceratopsians that use horns to their advantage, Styracosaurus is, no pun intended, the horniest of them all. Now, it only had one horn on its face, but it had a huge nasal horn sticking out of its nose on its beak that was about this long, about 2 to 2.5 feet long. But its frill was adorned with 6 to 8 like foot and a half long spikes that would give extra protection to its neck and body from its frill. And it also had 2 other spikes that would curve. No, it would have these like really short spikes that would jut out of its cheeks. So if you want a dinosaur that's always super horny, Styracosaurus is right up your alley. And surely a lot of predators took one look at Styracosaurus and saw its gnarly beak, its gnarly nasal horn, and all the horns coming out of its frill, and they thought, yeah, I'm good. I don't feel like getting spiked. No, thank you. Um, Sadly, Styracosaurus, I don't really think gets a lot of notoriety in film and television. I know it was showcased in the film Son of Kong because they reused the Styracosaurus model, which was supposed to be in the original King Kong, but they cut it for time. But sadly, it's only in a couple scenes in Styracosaurus. But it is still quite prominently featured in dinosaur books. And if you are familiar with ceratopsians, Aside from Triceratops and Torosaurus, Styracosaurus is one of the most well-known members of the ceratopsian family. So, yeah, I dig Styracosaurus. I think they're kind of an underrated dinosaur, and I think they should get more um, notoriety in pop culture. Coming in at number 7, now another disclaimer, with the exception of number 2, from here on out, number 7 and onward, these are all theropod dinosaurs. So coming in at number 7 is Ceratosaurus, name meaning horned lizard. Discovered in 1884 by Othniel Charles Marsh. It lived in the late Jurassic period, around 150 million years ago. Now, Ceratosaurus was a fairly large predatory dinosaur, but it lived alongside Allosaurus and Torvosaurus. So while it still was a decently sized theropod, it did live in the shadow of Allosaurus and Torvosaurus, but still, it was around 5 to 6 meters, or around 16 to 20 feet in length, and its weight ranged from around 1 to 1.5 tons. So it wasn't exactly a super predator, but it still was a quite gnarly and lethal predatory dinosaur in and of itself. This is, I think, another example of I think this would be described as a heavy middleweight type predatory dinosaur. Ceratosaurus wasn't going to attack Diplodocus or Apatosaurus or Brachiosaurus, especially, but it was a big nightmare to a lot of dryosaurs, small dromaeosaur like dinosaurs, and a lot of young, maybe some young sauropods, but it was a nightmare to a lot of other medium sized dinosaurs that Allosaurus and Torvosaurus didn't pay attention to. But it seemed like that's what it was good at doing. It was good at surviving, and it was good at living in the shadow of Allosaurus and Torvosaurus. And I always think, to quote Dinofax, in some cases, I do prefer underdogs. And it seems like in both the dinosaur world in real life, but also in the paleontology world, it seems like Ceratosaurus doesn't really get a whole lot of respect. But there are also a lot of people that say it's very underrated. And I would have to agree. I think Ceratosaurus is an extremely underrated dinosaur, and I do wish it would get a lot more notoriety. It had one cameo appearance in Jurassic Park 3, but even then, that was quite an inaccurate design because they just took the T Rex CG model, scaled it way down, put a horn on its nose, and colored it red and black. That's not Ceratosaurus. Ceratosaurus was built much, much differently than T Rex. And something that I learned recently, so hold on one second. Ooh. So apparently, I learned recently that Ceratosaurus, compared to many other theropod dinosaurs, it had a much longer skull compared to a lot of other, like proportionally compared to its body size, it had a huge skull. And also, like if they were to take Ceratosaurus and scale it up to T Rex size, it would have an even bigger skull than T Rex. But what's very notable is that apparently it had, I think, around 30 to 40 teeth in its mouth, and each tooth was about 4 inches in length. That's how long this blade is right here on my Cold Steel 4 Max Scout. This is a 4 inch blade. So imagine a dinosaur coming at you with a 3 to 4 foot long skull with 30 or 40 teeth that are this big coming at you. Quite a gnarly sight. I think for human-sized threats, aside from Dilophosaurus, I would bet that the Ceratosaurus or maybe the next dinosaur on this list would be the ultimate threat for humans, aside from the super big theropod dinosaurs like Carcharodontosaurus or Giganotosaurus or especially Tyrannosaurus. Yeah, Ceratosaurus is an underrated dinosaur, and I think it needs more appreciation. Again, whole bunch of teeth this big coming at you to try to bite you. No thanks. But coming in at number 6 is Carnotaurus. This, along with Dilophosaurus and Ceratosaurus, would be, in my opinion, the ultimate scariest predatory dinosaur for humans to encounter. That is roughly around human sized ish. Oh, I forgot who discovered this. Carnotaurus was discovered in 1984, and it lived in the late Cretaceous period, 72 to 68 million years ago. Um, it was discovered by Jose Bonaparte in Argentina. Um, and its name means meat-eating bull. It wasn't the biggest predatory dinosaur, obviously. Its size ranged from around 7.5 to 8 meters, 24 to 26 feet, and its weight ranged from 1.5 to 2 tons. So, um, Carnotaurus is obviously most well known for its wildly inaccurate design and depiction in the film Dinosaur by Disney from the year 2000. Well, my son likes that movie and he's kind of ruined it for me, but I loved that film when I was a kid and I loved the Carnotaurus as a result, but for a very misleading reasons because Disney's Dinosaur is very much so ripping off both Jurassic Park and The Land Before Time. And the Carnotaurus is essentially just the body shape and design of Carnotaurus plastered on a T-Rex sized dinosaur, and that's not accurate whatsoever. Carnotaurus was less than half the size of a fully grown T-Rex, and a T-Rex could very easily swipe aside a Carnotaurus without even flinching. Even the Jurassic Park version of Carnotaurus is still quite inaccurate to the real life version of Carnotaurus. It wasn't that spiky or armor plated, and it wasn't quite that big in the Jurassic Park movies. From what I've seen, the Carnotaurus is still quite a bit bigger than it was in real life. But still, aside from all that, I mean, it looks great in the Jurassic Park series, don't get me wrong. But yeah, Carnotaurus, kind of like with Ceratosaurus, Carnotaurus kind of lived in the shadows of the fellow Carcharodontosaurs and Tyrannosaurs that it lived alongside. But it's for that reason that I really still do like Carnotaurus. I mean, it does have a unique name, Carnotaurus, meat eating bull. It has a unique design, a very kind of short, stubby skull with some gnarly teeth and some horns to go along with it, and some fucking tiny, useless ass arms that were not suitable for combat or hunting whatsoever. um, but it's because of their somewhat almost ridiculous designs that I just think they're very distinctive and notable. Uh, they look cool, and yeah, I like the Carnotaurus a lot. I think they're, again, also very underrated. Well, not quite as underrated, but they are still cool dinosaurs. Um, so yeah, I like the Carnotaurs. Coming in at number five, is Albertosaurus, the second tyrannosaur on this list. Albertosaurus was discovered also, or in 1884. I also did not get who discovered it. Albertosaurus was discovered in 1884, but it wasn't officially named until 1905 by Henry Fairfield Osborne. Um, Albertosaurus, of course, its name means Alberta lizard because that's where it was discovered in the Alberta province in Canada. And you could say that Albertosaurus was the Canadian equivalent of T Rex. Although, funny enough, Albertosaurus is actually one of two members of the Tyrannosaur family that makes up the subfamily Albertosaurinae, the other being Gorgosaurus. Gorgosaurus and Albertosaurus, they were fairly large tyrannosaurs, but they are distinct for having smaller heads compared to other tyrannosaurs of their size, and they have slimmer, more athletic builds, and they have much longer hind legs compared to other tyrannosaurs. But still, Albertosaurus was still a fairly sized tyrannosaur. It lived in the late Cretaceous period around 76 to 70 million years ago, and its size ranged from 8 to 9 meters or 26 to 30 feet. Although apparently the largest specimen of Albertosaurus was a 28-year-old male that was 33 feet in length. I think that would make it the largest member ever found, and its weight ranged from 1.7 to around 3 tons. And that's something that I really like about Albertosaurus is that it is a tyrannosaur. It is a member of the most famous group of predatory dinosaurs and potentially the most powerful group of predatory dinosaurs that ever lived. But it kind of seemed like it was the perfect mix of body designs for the tyrannosaurs. It was fairly large, again, around 33 feet in length, but it wasn't as heavy as a lot of other tyrannosaurs. So even fully grown, it still could be a somewhat more lightweight and agile version of T Rex while having the large skull, teeth, and bite force to make it a very formidable predatory dinosaur. And a lot, like a lot of other tyrannosaurs, it too probably was the I don't want to say apex predator because no, of its ecosystem, it probably was the apex predator, um, hunting a whole slew of other dinosaurs, some ceratopsians, hadrosaurs, and other large dinosaurs. So yeah, it probably was the apex predator of its habitat. And yeah, I think Canadian T Rex, I think, is a very fitting nickname for Albertosaurus. And it just has kind of a cool name, Alberta lizard, Albertosaurus. It rolls off your tongue well. But not as much as my number four, Daspletosaurus, the third tyrannosaur on this list. Daspletosaurus was discovered in 1921 by Charles Mortram Sternberg, but it wasn't officially named until 1970. It lived in the late Cretaceous period, 78 to 74 million years ago. Its name means frightful lizard, and its size was frightful indeed. It ranged from 8.5 to around 10 meters in length, and its weight was around 3 to 4 tons. Daspletosaurus is my second favorite tyrannosaur because it essentially, like, Tarbosaurus is the Asian equivalent and it is a diet T Rex. But Daspletosaurus, I like to think, is a precursor to T Rex. Its body structure is very similar, its skull is very similarly shaped. Now, like I said, T Rex had a very wide and broad skull, but Daspletosaurus, it wasn't quite as wide towards the back of the skull, but it overall, from the back of its skull to its snout, it was a very just widely shaped mouth, and it had a very rigid and heavily constructed skull, which uh, heavily implies that it had an extremely powerful and crushing bite. Um, it too, like a lot of other tyrannosaurs, had a very big head and a very large, tanky, muscular body. And something unique about Daspletosaurus is that its forelimbs are the longest in proportion compared to other tyrannosaurs. So it's funny, you have Tarbosaurus, the second largest tyrannosaur, having the smallest arms proportionally. And then you have Daspletosaurus, I think the fourth largest tyrannosaur, and it had the longest arms compared to other tyrannosaurs. And there is some evidence that suggests that their arms were somewhat used for hunting in a limited capacity. There's not a whole lot of evidence, but I have read that it possibly could have used its arms somewhat for hunting. But even still, because it had such a heavily constructed skull and such a gnarly bite, uh, Daspletosaurus easily could have just hunted with its mouth alone. And because of its size, like Albertosaurus and Tarbosaurus, Daspletosaurus would have also been the apex predator of its ecosystem. And it actually did live alongside another tyrannosaur species, that being Gorgosaurus, the other member of the Albertosaurus family. Uh, but because the two were differently designed, they were still tyrannosaurs, but Daspletosaurus was much more stocky and tank-like in nature, and Gorgosaurus was much more lightweight and it was smaller. It ranged from around 26 feet in length, so it was smaller. They probably avoided each other as much as they could, and they hunted different prey as much as they could. This is called niche partitioning or niche differentiation. Because they're built differently and they look differently, they stuck with their own kind, and they hunted different prey. Daspletosaurus, because it was bigger, probably hunted ceratopsians and smaller sauropods and larger hadrosaurs, whereas Gorgosaurus hunted smaller, similarly sized prey to itself in an effort to stay away from each other as much as possible and avoid contact with each other as much as possible. But admittedly, the main reason why I dig Daspletosaurus so much, one, it was prominently featured in the miniseries Dinosaur Planet, which is this is actually where I discovered Daspletosaurus as a species. But because it is essentially a prototype version of T Rex, that gives it a lot of extra brownie points for me because I love T Rex. And then you give me a prototype version of T Rex, that's still cool to me. Coming in at number three, Carcharodontosaurus. It just rolls right off your tongue. Carcharodontosaurus was discovered in 1914 by Ernst Stromer. I think this guy was another pretty uh, well-known paleontologist. It lived in the mid-Cretaceous period around 100 to 94 million years ago. Its name means shark-toothed lizard. Um, what the fuck? I had a sentence and it's just or the name stemming from the fact that Carcharodontosaurus, its teeth were very shark-like in design. They were somewhat shaped like this, but both sides of the teeth were serrated, just like shark teeth. Um, and they were large predators. Carcharodontosaurus is actually among the top five largest predatory dinosaurs that ever lived. Its size ranged from 12 to 12 and a half meters, 39 to 41 feet, and its weight ranged from 5 to 7 tons. So it was a big heavy hitter. Carcharodontosaurus is just one of my absolute favorite dinosaurs. It has such a cool look and it has such a cool just appearance. It has a huge skull, I think ranging around 5 to 5.5 feet long. And it has all of these gnarly, distinctive teeth all throughout its jaw that just makes it look like such a fearsome, scary dinosaur. And Carcharodontosaurus, or obviously it's the namesake of the species Carcharodontosaurid. There's actually quite a few very well-known dinosaurs that are members of the Carcharodontosaur family. There's Mapusaurus, um, Tyrannotitan. I love that name. Tyrant Titan. Tyrannotitan. That's such a cool name. And the most famous, aside from Carcharodontosaurus itself, is Giganotosaurus. That is a member of the Carcharodontosaurid family. And it's kind of debatable which one was bigger, although I think Giganotosaurus weighed more than Carcharodontosaurus, but they were still very similar in appearance. But I've always leaned more towards Carcharodontosaurus. I think Giganotosaurus is a cool dinosaur, but I just think it's a little overrated. Um, yeah, I've always leaned more towards Carcharodontosaurus. It's kind of a shame too that technically now Carcharodontosaurus is not quite as well represented in pop culture and in real life because a lot of remains of Carcharodontosaurus were destroyed in a museum that they were being held. So now we just kind of have a lot of crappy fragmentary remains. But also, my first exposure to Carcharodontosaurus, which was from the final episode of Dinosaur Planet, uh, it said that's Carcharodontosaurus in that episode, but it was not. It was another member of the Carcharodontosaurid family, Aerostion, I think it was called. But Aerostion lived in South America. Carcharodontosaurus did not, because that's where that episode takes place in. Carcharodontosaurus lived in Africa, hence its subname, Carcharodontosaurus saharica. It lived in the Sahara Desert. Um, yeah, I love Carcharodontosaurus. I think it's just such a cool looking dinosaur, and I like that it's very distinctly different. So I would definitely say the Carcharodontosaur family is kind of the biggest rival to the Tyrannosaur family, and there is distinct differences between Carcharodontosaurs and Tyrannosaurs in their skulls. Tyrannosaurs, even the smaller ones and the lesser versions, like even with Tarbosaurus, they still had very long, broad skulls, but Carcharodontosaurs had very narrow skulls compared to tyrannosaurs. And the power with their bites and the way that they killed their prey was also, again, very distinctly different from tyrannosaurs. Carcharodontosaurs would use their shark tooth shaped teeth and their narrow jaws to just keep snipping at, not really snipping, but they would just slice through flesh. They had strong bites, but they couldn't really crush bone with one bite. They would use their sharp teeth and their narrow skulls to just inflict surface level damage with their knife like teeth, just slice through flesh, take off hunks of meat, and just let their prey die of blood loss. And then they would go in to feed. So they were very, again, distinctly different from tyrannosaurs. And I just think it'd be a very interesting matchup. I mean, we kind of have seen it, but we didn't really in Jurassic World Dominion. But I think it would be cool to see uh, various tyrannosaurs go up against various Carcharodontosaurs. I just think it'd be a really interesting matchup between the two. But yeah, Carcharodontosaurus, I think it's a really cool dinosaur, really cool name, really cool look. Yeah, I dig it. Coming in at number 2, this is the only other ceratopsian. Oh, what else could it be? Triceratops. I love Triceratops. Triceratops is easily, it's my favorite herbivorous dinosaur that ever lived. And I think it is the coolest looking and the most iconic herbivorous dinosaur. Discovered in 1889 by, again, Othniel Charles Marsh. I think this is the third dinosaur that this guy discovered on my list. And its name obviously means three-horned face, Triceratops. And also, fun fact, the character of Sarah in the Land Before Time series, her name is spelled Cera, which is how you spell Sarah in Triceratops. So her name literally means horn, and she has a little horn on her nose because she is a Triceratops. They lived in the late Cretaceous period, 66 to 65 million years ago, and they were some massive, massive animals. Like, I like the Ankylosaurus and I like the Stegosaurus, but in my opinion, the Triceratops were the gnarliest and most heavily armored um, and most badass looking herbivorous dinosaurs. Their size ranged from 8 to 9 meters, 26 to 30 feet in length, and their weight ranged from 6 to 10 tons. So they were some massive, gnarly heavy hitters. Triceratops is obviously most easily identifiable by its distinctive frill and three large horns on its head. Uh, the frill obviously protected its neck and its lower back from attack, and it debatably was also adorned with like large bumps or maybe like short horns all throughout its frill to give it like an armored crown appearance. But obviously, its primary weapons were the three large horns on its head. Hold on. Trying to find how big the horns were. Triceratops had a large skull relative to its body size, among the largest of all land animals. The largest known skull is estimated to have been 2.5 meters or 8.2 feet in length when complete, and could reach almost a third of the length of the entire dinosaur. The front of its head was equipped with a large beak in front of its teeth. All ceratopsians had really gnarly beaks in front of their teeth, which was used to snap off, or yeah, just snap off low hanging branches and shrubs. but the skull featured a pair of superorbital brow horns, approximately 1 meter or 3.3 feet long, one above each eye. So, as big as this entire training sword that I have here. So, imagine a dinosaur that's 30 feet long coming at you with two horns that are this fucking big. Um, and it also had a smaller horn. I think it was like maybe about 8 to 10 inches on its nose, but it surely too could have done some damage coming into contact. But the main method of defense for Triceratops were obviously those two giant horns on top of its head. They easily could have pierced through the thickest hide of tyrannosaurs and inflict some gnarly wounds in the thigh or the tail or even through the intestine cavity. It was they could inflict some gnarly damage. Um, yeah, I just think Triceratops they are in my opinion, the second most iconic dinosaur of all time. Um, but they're just so badass looking. How they're showcased in film and television, I think, is usually pretty well done. They always look great, quite accurate to how they would have been in real life, especially in Jurassic Park. In the first film, when Alan Grant is saying hello to the sick female Triceratops, she looks great, and the special effects showcased to um, or used to showcase the dinosaur look absolutely top notch, and the design is top notch. So, Triceratops, as I stated, is the second most iconic dinosaur of all. But there's only one dinosaur that I think is even more iconic than Triceratops, and it's the one that preyed upon Triceratops. So, my number one favorite dinosaur of all time, not to be cliche and not to be a typical going along with the crowd type dinosaur fan, but I really can't help it. My number one favorite dinosaur is the mighty Tyrannosaurus Rex, the largest member of the Tyrannosaur family, the most popular dinosaur in pulp culture, the only dinosaur that is known by the general audience by its full Latin name, Tyrannosaurus Rex, Tyrant Lizard King, and is the most, maybe not, no, I'd probably say it's, I think, the most well studied and well known member of the entire dinosaur species. First discovered, I believe, in the year 1900 by Barnum Brown. It lived, of course, in the late Cretaceous period around 72 to 65 million years ago. It lived up until the KT mass extinction event. And it was a massive, massive animal. And to this day, it is the largest terrestrial carnivorous animal that ever lived. Its size ranged from 12 to 13 meters, 40 to 43 feet, and its weight ranged from, I was wrong in Jurassic Park review, from around 8 to 10 tons. And there's even some estimates, because recently there was a T-Rex femur bone, and its code name is Goliath. And based on its size, some people theorize that T-Rex could have even gotten up to 12 to 13 tons and maybe around 45 to maybe 48 feet in length. But we just don't know, because I don't think a lot of people realize, especially theropod dinosaurs, there's very few, probably, examples of dinosaurs that live to their full life expectancy, because the life of a dinosaur was one of a lot of high stress and survival of the fittest. They all live very difficult and short and tragic lives. Um, a lot of dinosaurs were killed before they could reach their full life expectancy. Some of them died when they were only a few weeks old. Some probably died from fights with other dinosaurs. Some died probably from disease by eating rotten meat or drinking poisoned water. Um, but with Tyrannosaurus being such a big dinosaur and um, it having such a harsh life, I wouldn't be surprised if it actually could reach somewhat larger sizes than what we have unearthed and discovered about T-Rex over the years. But it just would have been very difficult because the life of Tyrannosaurs was so difficult. Um, but yeah, Tyrannosaurus Rex is just such a badass and iconic dinosaur. It looks so cool. Tyrannosaurus was always my favorite dinosaur to research and look at when I was a kid. And still to this day, it is my favorite dinosaur to research and look at. It's my favorite dinosaur showcased in Jurassic Park. It's the one dinosaur that I think of that I would love to see King Kong fight over and over again. It obviously was the main basis for the Vistatosaurus Rex in fuck my nose. I am so sorry. My nose is just so itchy. It was the main inspiration for the Vistatosaurus Rex in King Kong '05. That name meaning Ravager Lizard King, but it obviously is an offshoot or an evolved form of T Rex. Um, and yeah, it's just my favorite dinosaur. And obviously, of course, too, T Rex was one of the main inspirations for Godzilla because the creators of Godzilla combined the appearances of a Stegosaurus, the arms of an iguanodon, and the overall body shape and look of a Tyrannosaurus Rex at the time. But still, T Rex does serve as a big inspiration for for Godzilla. So yeah, not to be boring or generic or typical for dinosaur fans to have T Rex as my number one favorite dinosaur, but I just can't deny how I feel, guys. Sorry, but not sorry. I just love Tyrannosaurus Rex. It's such a cool dinosaur. Um, so that'll about do it. So apologies if I was a little all over the place with this video. Again, I'm very much so outside my comfort zone, and I want to leave this video on a bit of a big question. So, as I stated earlier in this video, that it seemed like dinosaurs peaked as a species, and then if this is how dinosaurs died, then the asteroid came and hit the planet and wiped out the dinosaurs. So, had that not happened, what could we have seen from dinosaurs if they were to evolve further naturally and possibly naturally die out as a species? Or would they have died out as a species? Or would they have continued to reign and evolve as a species and continue to dominate the planet? Like, I don't know, would we see something like the Good Dinosaur from Disney? Or would they have evolved and died out naturally, I don't know, 30, 40, maybe 50 million years after T-Rex? Like, would they have died out naturally, or would they have just kept evolving? Because it seemed like um, they really, really were building up to something big, and they had built up to something big. Again, like Triceratops and T-Rex, two of some of the largest dinosaurs that ever lived, especially with T-Rex. It was the largest terrestrial carnivorous animal that ever lived. Um, would they have just kept evolving and kept getting bigger, or would they have gone into decline had the asteroid not hit the planet. It's an interesting thought to think about. Um, but that'll about do it for this video. I want to give thanks to the Dino Facts and Extinct Zoo for inspiring me to do this video. I had a lot of fun. I again ask that you pardon all of my stutters and interruptions and being a little all over the place doing this video. But post your comments down below. Let me know what you think. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, share this video with your friends. And go check out Dino Facts. Go check out Extinct Zoo. Tell me what your favorite dinosaur is down in the comments. And, you know, going on this journey and talking about all these dinosaurs, even though all of these are animals that lived on planet Earth, it just feels like we're getting a glimpse into a different world. And it just makes me kind of want to go into a different world of my own. Maybe a Jurassic World, if you will. And I will see you guys in the next one.